It all started with the usual chatter about work. Emily and I had been married for 3 years, and while we had our fair share of ups and downs, I never suspected that something like this could happen. She was always the one who'd reassure me when I had doubts, always quick with a smile, a laugh, or a kiss that made me feel like I was her world. But the cracks had been showing for a while, and I ignored them. "Babe, I'm going away for the weekend," she said, tossing a bag over her shoulder. "It's just a girls' trip to Vegas. You know, with the girls from college." It was the first time she'd mentioned it, and I felt a little uncomfortable. Vegas? Sure, she deserved a break, but something about the idea just didn't sit right with me. The way she said it, almost too casually, made me feel like she was trying to hide something. But I was naive, too trusting even, so I told her to go ahead, told her she deserved it, and waved her off as she packed her bags. For the first couple of days, everything seemed fine. We exchanged a few texts, nothing too special, just the usual "I miss you" and "having fun, wish you were here" messages. But as the weekend wore on, her responses started to feel a little different. Shorter, vague, and I noticed a subtle shift in her tone. She wasn't the carefree Emily I knew. She was distant. By Saturday night, I hadn't heard from her in hours. I tried to ignore the gnawing feeling in the pit of my stomach as I spent the evening at a bar with my friends. I told myself it was just me being paranoid. She was having fun, right? I sent her a text around 9 p.m. "Hope you're having a blast. Miss you." A few minutes later, my phone buzzed with her reply. "I miss you too. Everything's great." That was the last message I'd get from her that night. I should have known something was up when she didn't respond to my next few texts, and I definitely should have known when I saw the time. It was nearing 2 a.m., and I hadn't heard a thing from her. The nagging feeling was starting to turn into full-blown anxiety, so I tried calling her. No answer. I tried again. Still nothing. At this point, I was on edge. I didn't know it then, but while I was sitting in a dimly lit bar, my wife was somewhere on the Las Vegas Strip, slipping deeper into a night of reckless abandon. Her friends were all there, dancing and drinking, enjoying the wild freedom of a city that never slept. But Emily wasn't just there for the fun. She was there to escape. She was there because in the weeks leading up to the trip, she'd been growing restless with me, with our life, and with everything she'd once been so sure about. She had met Jason, an old acquaintance from college who had come to Vegas for a business conference. Jason was charming, smooth, and, from what Emily later told me, a little too good at making her feel like she was the only person in the room. It didn't take long before Emily, a few drinks in and lost in the energy of the night, found herself flirting with him. By the time they were standing close enough that their bodies were brushing against each other, it felt like nothing else mattered. It was like the universe had aligned for this moment. The sparks between them were instant, undeniable. It didn't even seem to matter that Emily was married. Jason was just there. I had no idea that my wife, the woman I thought I knew so well, was already on her way to a penthouse suite in the heart of the Strip with Jason by her side. It all started innocently enough. They went to a nearby bar for a few more drinks. Emily, tipsy but not completely out of control, couldn't shake the feeling that something exciting was about to happen. Jason was charming, but there was something else, something darker about him that, in that moment, Emily didn't even care to notice. As the hours ticked by, they grew closer. Jason suggested they head back to his hotel room. Emily hesitated for a moment, but then she thought about how she hadn't been feeling herself lately, how she felt more alive in Jason's presence than she had in months. And that's when she made her choice. Meanwhile, back in Denver, I was still waiting for a call. The text I'd sent had gone unanswered. It wasn't like her to be so late without at least checking in. But I kept telling myself that she was just having a good time. Maybe she and her friends were out at some club, dancing the night away. Then, around 3:30 a.m., I got a call from her. "Babe," she whispered, her voice thick with alcohol. I'm so sorry. I was having so much fun and lost track of time. I miss you. I love you." I felt a pang of relief. That was until I heard a muffled voice in the background. A man's voice. I didn't think much of it at first, Maybe it was one of her friends. But as I listened, I heard the voice again, closer this time. Something in me clicked. "Who's that?" I asked, my voice suddenly tight with suspicion. There was a pause. Then Emily said, "Oh, it's nothing. Just someone from the club. Anyway, I'll be back tomorrow. Can't wait to see you." The line went dead, and I was left staring at my phone, feeling like something wasn't right. But I told myself I was overreacting. I told myself that maybe it was just a misunderstanding. I tried to push the feeling down, but it stuck with me the whole night. The next morning, I woke up to a text from Emily. "Heading to the airport soon. Can't wait to be home." And just like that, I breathed a sigh of relief. She was coming back. We'd talk about it, laugh it off, and everything would be fine. But deep down, I had no idea that I was about to discover something that would shatter my entire world. What happened next was something I never expected. It would be the moment that I learned the true cost of trust. I didn't know it yet, but the moment Emily walked through that door was going to be the last time I looked at her the same way again. The morning after her late-night call, I tried to go about my day. But the anxiety in the pit of my stomach never went away. It lingered like an echo, growing louder every time I thought about her return. I kept playing over the phone call in my head, the muffled man's voice, her weirdly hurried excuse. It didn't add up, but I told myself to calm down. She was my wife. I knew her. There was no reason to jump to conclusions. When I picked her up from the airport, Emily seemed, well, like herself, giddy with that familiar smile that always made me weak in the knees. She hugged me tightly when I saw her at baggage claim, her warmth wrapping around me as she buried her face in my chest. "I missed you so much," she whispered, her voice soft, her lips brushing against my neck. It felt real, but there was something in the way she held me that didn't sit right. It was like she was clinging to me a little too tightly, almost as if she were trying to convince herself that everything was normal. I smiled and kissed her cheek, brushing off the doubt. "Missed you too, Em. You look good." "Vegas was amazing," she said, pulling back and grinning. "But I'm glad to be home. Did you get up to anything fun?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light. "Anything I should know about?" She laughed a little too nervously. "Nothing crazy, just the usual Vegas stuff. Clubs, drinks, lots of dancing." I didn't press. I told myself I was being paranoid. Maybe I was just looking for something to be wrong. When we got home, we sat down for dinner, and I tried to keep the conversation casual. She seemed relaxed, and for a moment, I almost convinced myself that I'd imagined everything. But something kept nagging at me, tugging at the edges of my mind. I couldn't shake the image of her laughing with that guy, Jason, and the weirdness in her voice during the call. "I know you had fun," I said, trying to sound nonchalant as we finished eating. "But tell me, who was that guy you were talking to last night? On the phone?" Her eyes flickered, just for a second, and she stopped chewing. "What guy?" "The one I heard in the background." I didn't recognize him. I kept my voice steady, careful not to sound accusatory, but I couldn't hide the slight edge in it. "Oh, that's no one," she said quickly, her tone a little too defensive. "Just a guy from the club. Nothing happened. You know how it is in Vegas. I don't even remember his name." I wanted to believe her. I really did, but my gut was telling me something else. That night, as we lay in bed together, Emily curled up against me like she always did, her head resting on my chest. Her soft breathing, the warmth of her body, it was everything I loved about being with her. But the nagging feeling in my gut wouldn't let go. I tossed and turned, staring at the ceiling, listening to her slow, even breath. I couldn't shake the thought that something wasn't right, that something was different. The next morning, I decided to do something I never thought I'd have to do. I went through her phone. I knew it wasn't right, but I couldn't help myself. I needed to know. Her texts from the Vegas trip were mostly about the usual stuff. What time they were meeting up, who was where, plans to go out again. But as I scrolled further, I found one thread that made my blood run cold. It was a conversation between Emily and someone named Jay. At first, I thought it was just another friend, maybe someone from the trip, but the more I read, the more I realized that Jay wasn't a friend. It was Jason. The messages were flirtatious, with each text growing more suggestive than the last. "I'm thinking about you," one read. "Wish I could see you again before I leave. Just for a little while." My heart pounded as I read through their entire conversation. My wife, the woman I trusted with everything, was sending messages like this to another man. I couldn't breathe. My hands were shaking as I tapped on the final message. "You were amazing last night. Can't wait to see you again." I felt sick, betrayed. But worse, I realized that she was already planning on seeing him again. Maybe not immediately, but the promise was there in those words. It wasn't just a one-night thing. It was an affair. I closed the phone, my head spinning. How could she do this to me? I thought I knew her better than anyone, but this was a side of her I never knew existed. I couldn't confront her just yet. Not like this. I had to know more. I needed proof. I needed to be sure. So, I did what any confused, heartbroken husband would do. I decided to follow her. The next few days were a blur. I kept my distance, pretending everything was fine, as I waited for the perfect opportunity. Emily was back to her usual routine, going to work, meeting friends for drinks, getting home late, but there was a change in the air. I felt it. It was like the air had thickened between us, and I could tell she was being careful, watching her steps around me. She knew something was up, but she had no idea how close I was to figuring everything out. Then, on a Thursday evening, the opportunity came. I knew she had plans to meet a friend from work for drinks at a local bar, and that was when I decided to follow her. I wasn't sure what I'd find, but I needed to see for myself. The suspense was killing me. Little did I know, what I would discover that night would be more than I ever imagined. I didn't expect to find what I did that night. I thought I'd maybe catch a flirtatious moment, something harmless enough to excuse, but what I saw, that shattered everything. It was around 8 p.m. when Emily left the house. She was dressed casually, just a pair of jeans and a jacket, but there was something about her that night, something that didn't sit right. Maybe it was the way she walked out the door, like she was trying to hide something, or maybe it was the feeling I had in my gut that something wasn't as it seemed. Either way, my heart was already pounding as I grabbed my keys and followed her. I stayed a few cars behind as she drove to a small bar on the outskirts of town. It wasn't the usual spot she'd go to with friends. She had mentioned a place called The Vibe before, a trendy spot downtown, but this place was quieter, more secluded. My gut clenched. I knew where this was heading. I parked down the street, out of sight, and watched her go inside. The minutes felt like hours, each second stretching out as I sat there, hands gripping the steering wheel. I told myself I was just being paranoid, that nothing was going on, but deep down I knew. I had a feeling. Then, about 30 minutes later, I saw her leave the bar. And this time, she wasn't alone. Jason was with her. My chest tightened. I didn't need to hear their conversation. I didn't need to see anything more. The way they walked together, how close they were, how comfortable. They weren't just friends. The look they shared when they glanced at each other said everything. They weren't just talking. There was something else, something I wasn't supposed to see. They got in her car, and I followed, heart hammering in my chest. I kept my distance, but it was becoming harder to breathe. I couldn't stop. My mind raced with 1,000 thoughts, but they all pointed to one thing. I knew what was coming, even if I didn't want to face it. They didn't drive home. Instead, they headed toward the outskirts of the city. I kept my car far behind, trying to remain unnoticed, but everything inside me screamed that I was about to see something I couldn't ignore. They pulled off the main road and into a secluded area, parking behind a row of trees. I parked a good distance away, keeping myself hidden as I watched them. My hands shook as I turned off the engine and sat in silence, the anticipation rising with each passing second. I wasn't sure what I was looking for. Maybe I was hoping it was all a mistake, that it was some kind of misunderstanding. But deep down, I already knew. What happened next confirmed everything I feared. I watched as they got out of the car. Jason walked around to Emily's side, and without any hesitation, He pulled her close. His hands moved to her waist, and she didn't pull away. Instead, she leaned into him, and that's when I saw it. The way she looked at him, like there was no one else in the world. Like he was the only person who mattered. I felt like I couldn't breathe. They didn't even seem to notice the car in the distance. Jason's lips found hers in a kiss that wasn't just passionate. It was full of everything I hadn't seen between Emily and me in months. The way they kissed, it was intimate, slow, like they were lost in each other. I could see it from where I was parked. Emily's hands slid up Jason's chest, pulling him closer, and his hands began to move down her back. Everything in me screamed to turn away, to walk away from this. But I couldn't. I was frozen, watching as they moved together, and everything I had been afraid of came crashing down on me. They weren't just kissing anymore. Jason's hand slid into the car, and I saw him push the seat back. Emily followed, her body pressing against his, and within moments, they were inside the car, the door barely closed. I couldn't look away. Jason kissed her harder, deeper, and I watched as he pulled off her jacket, his hands moving with an urgency that made my heart race. Emily didn't resist. She didn't hesitate. It was like she was already lost in him. She unbuttoned her shirt, and I saw her shift against him, her body giving in to whatever was happening between them. I didn't know what to do. I felt like I was suffocating, my whole body tense, like I was the one who had been caught in this moment, not them. Jason's hands slid under her shirt, and Emily's back arched as she pulled him closer. The windows of the car began to fog up, and I could barely see the details, but I didn't need to. I could hear them, the sounds, soft moans, the rustling of clothes, were enough to send a wave of nausea through me. But I couldn't stop watching. They weren't just kissing anymore. Jason's hands moved between them, and Emily's breath hitched as she shifted in the seat. I could hear the soft, familiar sounds of them moving together in the confined space of the car, and everything in my world seemed to shatter. The worst part? She wasn't just responding to him. She was giving herself to him, in a way I hadn't seen in so long, a way I'd thought was reserved only for me. I felt like I was on the outside looking in, like I was watching someone else live my life. The betrayal was overwhelming, and I felt my body freeze, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. They continued for what felt like forever, but I couldn't bring myself to move. I just sat there, watching, feeling the weight of every second pressing down on me. It was real. It wasn't a mistake. This wasn't just some brief lapse. This was a relationship. And Emily? She was lost in it. Completely. When they finally stopped, I watched as Jason kissed her one last time before getting out of the car. Emily followed shortly after, straightening herself up. I watched them walk away, holding hands, like they had no care in the world, like they hadn't just torn apart everything I thought I knew. I stayed there for a while longer, unable to move. It felt like my world had collapsed, and I was trapped in this nightmare, unable to escape. Eventually, I drove home. I didn't know what I was supposed to do now. I didn't know how to face her. All I knew was that the person I had loved, the woman I thought I could trust, was gone. And in her place was someone I didn't recognize. I didn't have answers, only questions, only the overwhelming pain of betrayal. And I had no idea what I was going to do about it. But I couldn't avoid the truth anymore. Everything had changed. The night dragged on, but sleep never came. I couldn't escape the images, the sounds, the way she kissed him. I could still hear it in my mind like it was happening right next to me. Every thought turned into a question, a knot in my stomach growing tighter. How long had this been going on? Was it just Jason, or was there more? Did she think I wouldn't find out? By the time morning came, I was exhausted, physically and mentally, but I knew one thing. I had to confront her. I couldn't let this fester inside me. As much as I wanted to avoid it, I couldn't pretend anymore. I had seen everything, and it was time to face the truth. She came home around 10 a.m., looking no different than any other day. She smiled when she saw me, but it was strained, like she could tell something was off. The silence between us was heavy, thick with the weight of everything that had happened. She tried to act normal, as if nothing had changed, but I couldn't pretend anymore. I couldn't play the part of the oblivious husband who didn't know what was going on behind his back. "Morning," she said, her voice quiet, unsure. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I just stared at her, my eyes scanning her face, searching for something, anything, that might tell me she was about to confess, that maybe she'd been waiting for the right moment. But no, there was nothing, not even a flicker of guilt. Finally I spoke. "I saw you last night," I said, my voice flat, but underneath, there was an anger I could barely control. Her expression faltered, but she quickly recovered, a forced smile tugging at the corner of her lips. "What are you talking about?" she asked, though I could tell by the way she shifted her weight that she knew exactly what I meant. I didn't give her the chance to lie. "Don't play dumb. I followed you. I saw everything. I saw you with Jason. In the car. You were having sex with him. Emily." The room seemed to freeze. Her face drained of color, and for a moment I wondered if she would deny it, if she'd try to twist the truth into something I could stomach. But instead, she just stood there, staring at me, her lips trembling, her eyes avoiding mine. For a long time, there was nothing but silence. Then finally she spoke. "Mark, I didn't mean for this to happen," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't want to hurt you. I wanted to scream, to throw everything I had at her, but I couldn't. I needed to hear the truth. I needed her to tell me everything." "Then why?" I asked, the words coming out hoarse. "Why would you do this? What the hell was going through your mind? All the time we've spent together? You just threw it all away for him?" She closed her eyes, her face crumpling as if she were about to cry, but she didn't. Instead, she took a deep breath and looked me in the eye. "It's not just about Jason. It's about me. I've been feeling lost. I've been feeling like I'm not really living anymore, like I'm just going through the motions. And when I met him, he made me feel alive again. He made me feel wanted. I couldn't breathe. So this is my fault? You cheat on me because you feel lost? What happened to the woman I married, Emily? The one who promised me forever?" She shook her head, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. "I'm so sorry, Mark. I never wanted to hurt you. I never wanted to hurt us, but I didn't know how to talk to you. I didn't know how to ask for what I needed without feeling like I was failing you. My heart felt like it was breaking, but I wasn't sure if I was angry or just numb. The words she was saying didn't make sense to me. So, this whole time, you've been needing something, and you couldn't even talk to me about it? You just went and had sex with another man instead?" She flinched at the word, but she didn't deny it. She looked down at her hands, her shoulders shaking with guilt. "I'm not proud of what I've done. I know it's wrong. But when I'm with him, I feel different. I feel like I can breathe again. And I hate myself for that, Mark." Her honesty hit me like a slap in the face. It was all too much. How was I supposed to process everything? The woman I loved, the woman I thought I knew, was gone, replaced by someone who had chosen someone else over me. Chose to go behind my back, to betray me in the worst possible way. I took a step back, my head spinning. "So, this is it then? You're just telling me that you've been unhappy for how long? And now you think I'm supposed to just forgive you?" Her voice cracked. "I don't know what I want anymore. I just know I can't keep lying to you." I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to scream at her, to demand that she choose between me and him. But another part of me just wanted to leave, to walk out and never look back. I took another step back. "I need time to think. I can't do this right now." Emily nodded, her face crumpling again as she sat down on the couch, covering her face with her hands. "I'm sorry, Mark. I don't know what else to say. I don't know what I want anymore either. But I don't want to lose you. But I didn't know if I could stay. The damage was done. And it felt like the woman I married was already gone, and all that was left was a stranger." I walked out of the room without saying another word. The weight of it all, the anger, the hurt, the confusion, it was too much to bear in that moment. I needed space. I needed clarity, and I needed to figure out how to move on from the person I thought I knew, the person I had loved. The truth was, I didn't know if we could survive this. And deep down, I wasn't sure if I wanted to. I spent the rest of the day walking around in a haze, trying to clear my head, but no matter where I went or what I did, my thoughts kept coming back to Emily and Jason. It felt like my entire world had been flipped upside down. I couldn't shake the images of her with him, the way they'd looked at each other, the way she had responded to him like I wasn't even in the picture anymore. I didn't want to stay at home, but I didn't know where else to go. Everywhere I looked, it felt like a reminder of everything that had fallen apart. I ended up at a bar, ordering a drink that I barely tasted. I didn't want to feel anything, but that was impossible. The anger, the betrayal, it burned inside me, threatening to consume me whole. As the hours passed, I started to numb myself with alcohol, hoping it would drown out the pain. But the more I drank, the more I couldn't stop thinking about her, about the life we'd built, about everything I thought was real. And the more I thought, the more questions swirled in my mind. How long had this been going on? How many times had she lied to my face? Was I just a fool? Then my phone buzzed. It was a message from Emily. I need to talk. Please don't ignore me. I'm sorry for everything. Please. I stared at it for a long time. The last thing I wanted to do was talk to her, but a part of me needed to hear what she had to say. I needed to know if there was any chance of salvaging anything from this wreck. I left the bar and headed home, the weight of the decision pressing down on me with every mile. When I walked through the door, Emily was sitting on the couch, her face pale, her eyes red from crying. She looked like she hadn't slept, like she hadn't eaten. She was a broken version of the woman I had known. "Mark, please," she whispered when she saw me. "I'm sorry for everything. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I need you to know I never meant for any of this to happen. It's just, I don't know how it got this far." I stood there, staring at her, not knowing what to say. "How long, Emily? How long have you been seeing him?" Her shoulders slumped as she looked down, unable to meet my eyes. "A few months. It started innocently enough. We'd run into each other at work, and he just made me feel seen. It wasn't intentional. I didn't go looking for this. But it got out of hand, and I didn't know how to stop it. I didn't know how to fix it." The rawness of her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to think that maybe there was still hope, that maybe we could salvage something from the ashes. But everything inside me screamed that I had been betrayed, that there was no going back. "I trusted you, Emily," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I gave you everything, and this is how you repay me." She reached for me, but I stepped back. "Please don't. Just don't touch me." Her hand fell to her lap, and she started crying harder, her sobs shaking her body. "I'm so sorry, Mark. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I need you to know that this wasn't about you. It wasn't about not loving you. It was about me. I don't even know who I am anymore." The words cut through me, deeper than any of the hurt she had caused. It was like she was apologizing not just for what she'd done, but for everything that had gone wrong in her own life. And I knew, deep down, that she wasn't the same woman I had fallen in love with. I closed my eyes, trying to control the storm of emotions inside me. I could hear her crying, feel the weight of her guilt pressing against me. But no matter how much I wanted to forgive her, I couldn't ignore the truth. She had crossed a line I couldn't cross back from. "I don't know what to say," I muttered, my voice trembling. "I don't know if I can ever forgive you for this." She nodded, tears still streaming down her face. "I understand. I never thought I could hurt you like this. I never thought I could be the one who destroyed everything." I stood there for what felt like forever, unsure of what to do, what to say. I wanted to scream, to throw everything at her. But instead, I just turned away. "I need some time, Emily. I need space to think. I can't do this right now." She didn't try to stop me as I walked out of the room. I could hear her sobs behind me, but I couldn't bring myself to go back to her. Not after everything that had happened. I stepped outside, the cool night air hitting my face like a slap. I didn't know what the future held. I didn't know if I could ever trust her again. But what I did know was that I couldn't keep living like this. I had to make a choice between forgiveness and walking away. I spent the rest of the night at a friend's place, drinking and thinking. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Emily's face. The way she looked when she first apologized, the way she had looked at Jason in the car. The betrayal was real, and it was deep. I wasn't sure how or if I could ever get past it. And then, just before I fell asleep, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was Jason. "Mark, I think you need to know the truth. Emily and I, it's not just a fling. We've been together for a while now. I don't want to make things worse, but you need to hear it from me. I care about her, and I think you deserve to know the truth." The words hit me like a freight train. My breath caught in my throat as I read it again, and I realized something. Emily wasn't just confused. She wasn't just lost. She was in love with him, and that was something I couldn't fight. I didn't know what was next, but one thing was clear. Emily and I were over. For good.